What is shaking, vinyl family? Welcome to Your Brain on Vinyl. If you're like me, you know that vinyl is more than just a way of listening to music. It's an experience. Whether it's that crackle at the start of a record or the warmth of analog sound, vinyl connects us to the music different. In each episode of Your Brain on Vinyl, Chris and I will be diving into the records that move us, the albums that stir up our memories, and the sounds that make us feel alive. And so if you love vinyl music and that deep emotional connection, you are in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you do not miss any of the fantastic vibes that are coming your way. Let's get into it. This is Your Brain on Vinyl. What is shaking, everybody? Welcome back to Your Brain on Vinyl. I'm here with Chris. We're having leftovers today, man. We just had Thanksgiving, so we are vibing out. We got to finish the video that we started last Monday. Chris, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to be back for round two. We left a lot of great records out from episode one purposely, so I'm excited to get through the next five, man.
Yeah, this is fun, dude. This might spawn a whole series of its own. It's like, I love talking about this stuff, man. It's so fun.
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, how about you went first last time? How about I go first this time? Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it, man.
And then you can send us home at the end of this. All right. So to start off this show, I've got a record that I listened to either on cassette or on CD. I'm not sure which, but in my car in college would have been like 1991 or something like that. Listen to this tape. In fact, kind of a funny story, actually. I had a beat up Hyundai Excel. And it was white, but one of the fenders was silver because when I bought it, it didn't have a fender. It didn't have rims on it. It was a hunk of junk. And then actually I ended up spray painting the fender later, whatever. It was not a chick magnet. But I remember like being in college at Chabot College in Hayward, California. And I would bump this because it's got some nice bass to it. And I remember this one time, this girl was standing there watching me as I was backing out with my junky car. And I rolled down my windows and cranked this up. I just thought I was so cool. And she just looked at me like, dude, you are such a tool. And it's Talking Heads speaking in tongues. I love this, man. And again, it was on repeat, dude. The one song that I love is This Must Be the Place. That is my favorite Talking Heads tune. And this is just fantastic, man. This is right there, I think, with Remain in Light. They're almost like I think of them as kind of like a spiritual brothers, so to speak. And I had this thing in the car and I would just bump it and try to look cute for girls, and it didn't work. But anyway, I love this, man. This is again, that's really why this one's coming up and why I'm thankful and why it's a leftover for me is because it sort of it takes me back to that time. And unfortunately, I actually went to college a few different times to finish, but on my first try, this was the record that one of the records I was bumping. And so, yeah, I love this record, man, for that reason. And just reminds me of being in the hoopty and playing this thing and just vibing out to it, man. Such a great record.
You're gonna lose your mind. The first ever record I ever bought on vinyl was that exact album.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I bought it at like a I guess it was like a used bookstore maybe, or like a thrift shop. And that was there. It was like $5. This is like early 2000s maybe. And I didn't even have a turntable, but I love the Talking Heads. And that was the exact album I bought.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool, man.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Crazy connection.
Really cool. Yeah, definitely. All right, give me a number. I got 5 to go through here.
Oh, let me pull up my numbers here. Hang on. All right. Let's go with number 4.
Oh, this is kind of a twofer just because it has 2 different album covers. This record means a lot to me. This band means a lot to me. You know me well enough now when we talk about music. I like a lot of music, but I like a lot of music that's before my time. This band, I feel, is one of the very, very, very few bands that I've been able to kind of grow up with. And it's a band from New York City, baby, called The Strokes. And this is their debut album.
Oh, that's cool.
And this was the second cover that came out. It's called Is This It? And this is the original cover that came out. That was the UK pressing. This is not an original UK pressing. It's just a music on vinyl repress. Why I love the Strokes and why I love this album. So this came out. It came out in the UK first. This interesting story with these guys. So they were kind of like this New York band. I think one of the last two great movements out of New York City as far as like music goes. And I forget the whole backstory, but they were there's like this underground music scene in New York. They wind up going to the UK first and they smash over there. I think the album came out like over the summer. And this is my senior year in high school in the fall. This comes out in October. It was actually supposed to come out before September 11th, but there was a track on the UK version, which was a single of theirs called New York City Cops.
Oh.
And it's not like degrading to police officers. It's a bunch of post-teenagers writing about their experience in New York City. And, I described the Strokes when they first came out as kind of like lo-fi punk. Like they're not punk rock, but they're kind of like garage rock, but they have like this New York leather jacket attitude, Marlboro Red, Budweiser, like kind of like a little, definitely like a Ramones image influence, I think, not necessarily like a musical influence. So the record got postponed and got released on October 9th. So this is senior year of high school, post 9/11. I'm in the suburbs of New York. It's just the world's going through a crazy time. And right when this record came out, I got my dream job at a music store.
Oh, wow.
This was just like on repeat all the time. The big hit was Last Night. And like every track on this record is like perfect. It's just a really good rock album. I don't know how else to say it. So the cool thing about this is it had enough pop crossover where it wasn't pop music, but it had enough crossover where like everybody worked in the music store, no matter what you were into. Like you put the Strokes record on, it was like 40 minutes of fury. We're all like, yes, like let's rock and roll. Like we're all between 16 and 22, maybe like high school and college kids, just really enjoying the record. They just have a New York FU attitude. And it really comes through in this album. And I just love it because I was there from the start when I was 17 and just followed them when I was in college. They're still releasing great music. Somebody we've talked about recently produced them. Rick Rubin produced their last album, and they just make great hits. There's a documentary and a book that came out. The book came out first. It's called Meet Me in the Bathroom. And they just did a documentary about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, which is worth watching, which kind of gives you insight to the Strokes and some other bands in that period. And it's I think you would like it. It's very reminiscent of like the punk rock CBGB's era from a movement, not as prolific, obviously, but I feel like you get that vibe of New York being that haven for artists and like, creating great music. So if you are into just garage rock or lo-fi rock, alternative rock, a little punk sensibility, and just like East Coast New York attitude, this Strokes album is amazing. I'm going to make a bold statement. It's one of the top 5 debut albums ever. And it's easily in my top like 150 to 200 albums of all time. It just gets accelerated because of the sentimental nostalgia it provides. But this is a go-to. Like I'd be curious to see how many times I played this or how many times I've streamed it, because it's just a comfort zone for me. It's just a great record. I highly recommend it.
That's cool, dude. Yeah, it's funny when you say like New York bands, when I think about, or groups, I think about New York, it's like I can't help but think about the Beastie Boys, man, because I was there from the beginning, and their whole thing was like New York and all this stuff. And so yeah, it's hard not to like get that imagery around, or that connection around the Beastie Boys at that time. So I still love the Beastie Boys, man. They're so great. But or listening to their music, that is. But yeah, so that's cool, man. I like the New York connection and everything that you had with them and everything.
Huge. They're a great band.
What's their big hit? I feel like I've heard of them, but maybe not. I mean, I've heard of them, but I don't know if I've heard their music.
Last Night was the big hit on this. It's hard for me to tell you what the big hits are outside of Last Night. New York City Cops was like a big single. Soma was huge on this. Is This It? Hard to Explain. Take It or I mean, you know what, man? When you're doing some work offline, this is like 12 tracks of like fury, and I think you'll find like a lot of Velvet Underground in them, a lot of Ramones, a lot of like New York Dolls. Like I don't know how to explain it. And if you look at
Yeah.
pictures of them, it kind of makes sense with the music. I know I recommend a lot to you. Like this is a record. I'm like, all right, I know I say a lot to Jason that he should listen to this, but like this is like a fun party record. I could see you listening to this, like I gotta find it on vinyl. It's just a good sound. I think you'll enjoy
Yeah,
it.
yeah. As long as it doesn't rhyme with dish, like I'm totally all for it, man. You know.
It does not rhyme with dish.
All right, let me get to my next one. This
Cool.
is a freaking record that I love to this day. I mean, all these things you said it last week. Like I can listen to this stuff any day of the week. I'll put it on the turntable and listen to it, no problem. It's going to take me right back in time. This is a funny one because much as I love this stuff, his stuff, I don't even know how to describe the period in my life. It was kind of a weird time, but I remember I had a roommate and I listened to this on CD and I loved it so much. I would embarrass myself because I was one of these cats that would like play music and like sing at the top of my lungs. I was like the hairbrush for the mic. I would like go, and then someone would walk in on me and I'd be like, pretend like I was brushing my hair or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, I got busted so many times, like vibing out to music. This was one, and this is George Michael's Faith. And
Nice.
what can I say about this, man? I mean, George Michael's clearly one of the great singers of all time. I put him right up there. I don't know. I mean, top 5 for me, maybe. He's so good. And it's not just the voice. I mean, it has to be the songwriting is there, especially on this record, man. Father Figure and Faith and I Want Your Sex is on here, but I like the part 2 is so good. And there's others I'm not gonna be able to remember, but what a record, dude. And what a sad story. I recently watched his bio. I think they I don't know how long it's been out, but it was like promoted on one of the channels, Netflix or something, and I watched it and it's like, it's like the unfortunate, a lot of the things that he was just one of those guys that was like he lacked in confidence so bad, just doubted himself in it, and whether it created anxiety or whatever it was, could not hold down relationships, the whole 9 and stuff like that. And so I don't, look, a lot of these people go through their own stuff, their own stories and everything, but he was just, when you see it and it's people that are like Whitney Houston, and when you see it with George Michael and MJ even, and the way he died and stuff, it's just like, it's so sad. But anyway, getting back to the happiness and what I'm thankful for, this record carried me through a period of time where, things were kind of actually tough. And, I had a roommate and stuff, and he's probably letting me stay for free. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life and everything. And this record was one that I'd put on and listen to a lot. Yeah, and I listen to it to this day. It's not one that, brings back good memories in the sense of like, where I go to listen to this to be nostalgia. It's more like I can listen to it now and just really, really appreciate the songwriting, the vocals. And this is a record that will make me tear up, man. And there's more than one. There's many records that will for different reasons. And this is one. Oftentimes I get really emotional when I'm listening to something where you're listening to the best that ever did it. And it's like and it's going to sound cheesy, but I think of George Michael in his prime as someone that was a genius in what he did. Like no one can do what he did better. And you just know like what a person is capable, like scaling Mount Everest or going to the moon or these different things. And, in his way, he did that. Like he was so freaking good. Anyway, so yeah, I love him. Gets me emotional to this day. George Michael, Faith, fantastic album. That's a record I'm grateful for.
Would you start I know George Michael from like the greatest hits. Is that like an album to start with if you're going to start with George Michael?
I would. Yeah, I think it's his most accessible, his most popular, probably best-selling record. There's a lot of great hits on here. I would imagine that his greatest hits has probably half of the songs on this album are probably on that. It's very good and a great place to start. And it'll introduce you to some of the other stuff that's on here that maybe isn't considered a greatest hit, but that's still amazing.
How popular was he? I mean, like, was he like the top? Was he the top of the pops? I don't mean it like in that sense, but was he like the top pop star at one time? Was he in competition? Was there a rivalry? Like what do you
I,
like? Do you remember any of that?
so he started out with Wham,
I remember
and
that. Yeah.
Wham was kind of around when like MJ was doing his thing with like Thriller, and Madonna was doing her thing and stuff. And then he broke out and did his own thing. I would put him right there. I mean, he was top tier for singers. George Michael was right there. Whitney Houston, George Michael, MJ, Madonna. I know she's not a great singer per se, but she did her thing. Those were the guys, man, back then.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like he's always like on the fringe of things. Obviously, like I know some of the Wham stuff. Yeah, I got to check him out. Like it's always, I hear him on the radio. Like if we're listening to XM or something in my wife's car, and I'm like, oh, it's a great tune. And I'm like, every time I hear George Michael, I'm like, oh, it's a great tune. So I wondered about the album experience. I'll have to investigate further.
All right, what you got? Oh, I got to give you another number. Okay, here we go. Let's do number 9.
Number nine. Oh, this is a special pick. This is my favorite artist of all time.
Okay, here we go. Settle in, folks.
I don't have idols or heroes except for this person. He's still making music. He's making really good music, actually, especially the past 20, 25 years. A couple of albums in there that you got to really stretch to enjoy. But if you understand the artist's career, they're easy to enjoy. This is another artist that was like everybody knows the name, and I had a greatest hits, and that was all well and good. But something happened to me in high school that really opened my mind. And I think a lot of people that are into music have this experience with like a teacher or like a mentor or somebody else of that ilk. So the album I'm going to show is Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home.
Oh, there it is.
This record I'm very thankful for because I had an English teacher in 10th grade. She was very young. Probably like a couple of years out of college or master's degree, whatever. Her name was Miss Sutton. I think her name has changed by now. And we were doing like short stories in literature or like English class or whatever. And she had this really cool way of, a couple of my teachers actually did, of tying music to the lesson plan, which was like tailor-made for me. And I was a pretty good student anyway, but like that just sent it over the top. So like, I know like one class we dissected REM's Losing My Religion. I can't remember some of the other songs she did, but we read this short story. I don't remember the name of the short story, but I remember the premise was like this girl kind of being whisked away by this like guy, almost like a Romeo and Juliet, but not really. And she played Bob Dylan's It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, and related it to the short story. And it was so impactful that I don't remember anything I read, but I remember that goddamn song. And again, I was kind of like, into Dylan for a 14-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid could be, just a greatest hits. But I immediately went out and found whatever album that song was on, and it was Bringing It All Back Home, bought it on CD. And it just doesn't stop here, because on this album, obviously Subterranean Homesick Blues is on here. I think that's one of the first rap songs ever written. Mr. Tambourine Man, like stuff that was way over my head at the time, but like I've dissected and paid attention to, like Gates of Eden or It's All Right, Mom, Only Bleeding. Like I'm so thankful for this record, because it's kind of like the Marley record I mentioned in the last episode. I think I would have gotten to Dylan enough, but like this at 14, 15, 16 years old, like just gave me a whole different understanding of like his music and lyrics and how important he was. Just such an important record for me. Like a lot of Dylan records are, but this one was the first Dylan album, non-greatest hits or compilation that I got. So I'm always very thankful for the exposure to this. And I thank my English teacher in 10th grade.
Dylan fans are gonna slay me on this one, but I know very little. I know a little bit about Dylan. Obviously, he influenced Jimi so hardcore, Jimi Hendrix, and different. Obviously, he's influenced a lot of people. But I've actually gone up the ladder a little bit with Dylan. Now I haven't listened to him in a while, and I want to come back to him at some point. One of the things I know about Dylan, and what's funny is I know it because of Michael Bloomfield. I knew about Michael Bloomfield from my dad first, and then was like, oh, he actually was with Dylan when he went electric, at the festival and all of this stuff. But I know Michael Bloomfield appears on a few albums. Is that one that Michael Bloomfield appears on?
What's confusing about this is that there's 3 sessions that happen in New York and Nashville. And no, so Bloomfield's not on Bring It All Back Home. He's on Highway 61. That's my bad. So the Dylan guys are going to get me too, even though he's my favorite artist. I messed that up. But he's on Highway 61 for sure. But there's kind of like this. I could talk about Dylan forever, but Dylan has these periods where he makes trilogies, and maybe they're related or not related, but he has, his 2nd through 4th album are untouchable. Then his 5th through his 7th album, another trilogy, untouchable. Then you go on the 70s, he has a trilogy. In 1997, 2001, and 2006, that's a trilogy to me that's like connected and smashed together. So the Dylan ladder is deep. Like, you can love Dylan and not like a lot of his stuff, and you can love everything that Dylan does and see it in perspective. But he's worth always trying again.
Right.
Because even if you love it, you're going to find something new. And if you weren't ready for it at one point, your taste could change, and now it comes through in another way. And if you're a big
that's what happened.
Yeah.
Just to be able to give it a chance, I was like, oh, I got to hear some Dylan, and I did. And I was like, okay, it's growing on me.
And one other quick thing on Dylan, then I'll shut up on him. But like 2 things, obviously lyrically incredible. You talked about inspiring Jimmy. He inspired the Beatles. They came out and said that.
Yeah.
But also from like a historical perspective, there's a ton of good documentaries on him and the one documentary is 4 hours long. It only goes up to 1966.
Wow.
So the documentary, it's 2 hours long. It's only about one tour. So there's a lot you can do and kind of figure out your eras, and similar to the Grateful Dead in some way. Dylan might have written a song one way in 1965, and from 1965 to 2024, he's played it 16 different arrangements across. So there is like that. What era are you listening to this song in, and how does that version come across? Right. He doesn't even play guitar anymore. He plays piano. So it's like everything is constantly evolving in his catalog, which is another fascinating thing. Similar to the Dead. I know the Dead may jam on a song or do it a certain way, have a different arrangement, but Dylan's the same way. Like, he expands on his catalog that already exists and recreates it, which is a fascinating thing as well. So
that's cool. All right, let me go to my next one here. We got I'm just going to show it. The B-52's Whammy. We're not going to go through a bunch of wind up on this one. This is a record that I discovered in high school. I remember Legal Tender was the big hit on this one that would play on the radio all the time. And I knew the song. I didn't know who sang it. I would just hear the song Legal Tender. In my mind, I always thought it was like a Devo song. I don't know why, because there's like female vocals and stuff, but just shows how whatever. It was so kind of casually abstract kind of in my head. Anyway, someone was like, that's not Devo. That's the B-52. So I went out and bought this. And yes, it was on vinyl. This is going back to like, mid-late 80s. And man, this thing is just packed. I love it. This is really a great album instrumentally, vocally, so many things going for it. A song like Trism, Queen of Las Vegas. Those are 2 songs that are 1 and 2 on side 2, which are masterpieces of what they are. I know that they won't get the credit. Man, this is great for people that will give it a chance. It's not just pop. It's not just fun. It is those things. But the B-52s, and I saw them play live a couple times back around 1990 probably. And the vocals are very lyrical. A lot of people will know Kate and Cindy, the female vocals on here, are more than just singers. The arrangements, their voices are 2 more instruments in the band, and it's just so freaking great. Trism, Queen of Las Vegas, Legal Tender, just some great songs on here. Whammy Kiss, Song for a Future Generation. Yeah, there's fun stuff too, kind of goofy. Big Bird, is on here and stuff, but I think on their the first album, the second album, which I'm going to space out on now, I can't think of the title. This one, I've listened to enough of this stuff and I've listened to enough music in general to be able to put it in its context. This is a great album. And it's also has the added benefit of being fun, singable, danceable. When I just need to vibe out, I'm having a bad day, I need to break out of it. This is the go-to. Very thankful for the B-52s in general. And I don't know, man, even saying it, I feel like they get a bad rap. I hate to be an apologist. Sometimes I feel like when I mention certain bands, like, people, I don't know, there are going to be certain crowds that are going to be like, oh, come on. But man, it's, if you can appreciate it, it's so, so good. So whammy, B-52s.
Dude, that run of the self-titled, Wild Planet,
That's one I couldn't think of,
Whammy.
yeah.
Then you had Bouncing Off the Satellites, and
So good.
then Cosmic Thing. I know they had stuff after that, but like those first 4 or 5 records are insane. I've been a defender of the B-52s forever. I don't know what I don't know if it was like coming them like being so wacky with like Rock Lobster, or like being very poppy with like Love Shack. Those tunes are incredible. The production is credible. The songwriting's incredible. It's just because they kind of had the pop appeal from like a wackiness standpoint. I think they got labeled as a novelty act, and they never should have been.
Right.
And there's a lot of soul in that band. I think there's a lot of Motown influence that people don't really pick up on. It's just reinterpreted in like a punk way to a certain
Right.
extent.
Well, it's like the Talking Heads. It's almost like they're taken more seriously, but that's how they presented themselves. Even though, what's his name? What's the lead singer's name?
David Byrne. Yeah,
David Byrne had a goofy kind of sort of presence, but I mean, I think people take Talking Heads more seriously, and the B-52s are thought of, like you said, as a novelty act. I will take the B-52s over the Talking Heads every day of the week. As much as I like the Talking Heads, I just think the B-52s just, for every reason I already mentioned, they're just so great. So, and I think my brother from another mother right there telling me that he likes them too. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so I wouldn't take him over the Talking Heads, but I strongly believe the first few B-52s records stacks up against the Talking Heads discography.
Yeah.
I prefer the T-Heads, but that's the thing. It's like they weren't even put in the same stratosphere, but
Right.
I feel like the Talking Heads were like more got more credibility because it was like a New York thing. It was like an art rock thing. It was like a CBGB's thing, and that's fine. But the B-52s, like I encourage people to forget what you know about them and just go back through like the first 3, 4, 5 records. They're really incredible.
Let me give you another number, my friend. Where's my numbers? Here we go. All right, let's go number 1.
All right. I'm very thankful for this album. Curtis Mayfield, Superfly.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
I can't say my parents were listening to Curtis Mayfield, Superfly, but I know that on the music they played, the radio stations they played, I always heard Freddie's Dead, and I always heard Superfly, and I was like, what the hell is this? This is the coolest stuff ever. And I'm thankful for this album for a lot of reasons. Number one, I know this isn't funk, but it opened up my mind to funk. It opened up my mind to like blaxploitation music and films. It opened up my mind and made me realize that Curtis Mayfield was in the freaking Impressions, and he co-wrote "People Get Ready." Like, and it opened my mind up, and I'm thankful for it because I love Curtis Mayfield is one of those artists like I'm a completist on, even the stuff that there's some questionable albums towards the end and in the middle that I'm just like, people will be shocked I own, but I love Curtis Mayfield. I love his songwriting. I love his guitar playing. I love his voice. I love the way he composes strings. I love like funky strings in songs. And this just has all of it. And what's really so much fun about this is like, again, ties to hip hop and like hearing some of these songs get sampled in the music that I grew up on at one point. And then also to me, like this is a soundtrack. Like these songs like are, I guess now they separate it, like you can buy a score and you can buy a soundtrack. Like, this is the score and the soundtrack, in my opinion. Like, this album mirrors the story of the film. You learn characters in this. Like, to me, might as well have been a concept album, even if there was no movie tied to it. This album really, it's one of the albums that just changed my life when I got my hands on it. And I got my hands on it at a pretty young age. I'm talking like I'm like 11, 12, 13 when I like found this and figured out what the hell it was. So
Yeah.
Curtis Mayfield Superfly, man, such a killer record. I have a couple different versions of this. One of these albums that I have like not an OG, but like early reissue. I have like another reissue. I have the MoFi. I freaking love Curtis Mayfield. And I love this album. That's all I have to say.
It's funny about that record is I listen to and love a lot of music that's kind of adjacent to that, but I've never really, I can't even say I've heard that whole record all the way through, and I've never owned a copy of it. I know it's one of those ones that's important. It shows up on lists and all that stuff, but it's like, it just wasn't anything I grew up with. So which is kind of cool because eventually I'll get around to it and I'll get to explore it fresh and new. Having said that, I love music, and I've heard the big songs that are on there and stuff. But I mean, I really am into that kind of music, and have a lot of records that are adjacent to that. So it's kind of interesting that one's kind of somehow avoided my collection so long.
The one thing about that's very unique when I play this record, there are very few albums that I play louder than this album when I play it.
Yeah,
I crank this album. It's just a whole vibe. It's a masterpiece. And I would say it might not even be his best album because there's a couple of others in his catalog that are really, really good around that time period. But that record we talked about the criteria. Like, it sounds good to me. There's no skips. It opened me up to something else. That opened me up to a whole new world in a way. And I know they're not fully related, but when I found that, then I found the stylistics. I found the Delphonics. I found Curtis Mayfield's early stuff. I found like Willie Hutch, like all this late 60s, early to mid 70s, like music that is all kind of intertwined. I know people will probably beat me up for kind of comparing those groups, but I just wanted to know more about that time period and what came before it. And like, that just rolled me into everything. Cause before that, it was like, I thought, this is so ignorant, but I was a little kid. I thought Motown was like R&B and that's all that existed. I thought Al Green was on Motown. I didn't know he was on like a whole different record label or like a different kind of like group of R&B singers. So like, this kind of put me on a path of discovery of that whole 10-year period, like 65 to 75, and what came about. So just very grateful for Curtis Mayfield Superfly.
All right. So when was this? I guess this came out around the same time I was listening to the Talking Heads in my car. I would occasionally eject that CD and put this one on. This one is a very special place in my heart, and my love for this band started earlier, but to me, it culminates right here. This is Depeche Mode's Songs of Faith and Devotion. And I probably started really being a huge Depeche Mode fan around Music for the Masses. And then, of course, Violator came out. I got to be there for it, and it's just a masterpiece. And then this came out. And to me, it was everything that was Music for the Masses and Violator was leading up to exploded right here, man. The last two tracks on the album are phenomenal. One Caress and Higher Love. The funny thing, One Caress, I think, is all acoustic. It's basically a symphony playing behind Martin Gore doing the vocals. And then it goes into Higher Love, which has David Gaughan as the singer on that one. And holy crap, dude. It's another one that'll bring tears to my eyes, man. This is a phenomenal record from start to finish. Like you said, no skips. All three of those records, no skips. And yeah, and this kind of was happening in a time I was coming out of high school, starting college again. That was kind of a big milestone and stuff. And this was just frequently in the CD player, along with Violator, either at home, in the car. And yeah, I mean, to this day, I just think they hold up so well. I think Depeche Mode stuff, this period holds up very, very well. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it, man. It's one of those things that's great songwriting, fantastic music, and great lyrics, vocals, everything to me just kind of really, this is the tip of the spear for Depeche Mode, in my opinion. So Songs of Faith and Devotion, love this one. Very thankful for it. And Yeah, for all time, man. The Desert Island record for me.
So just like how you said about Curtis Mayfield and Superfly, I feel like I'm right around Depeche Mode. Like I'm right, like I don't, and I like The Cure. I like the Talking. Like I'm like right around the area. And I know Violator, and I think I know one other pretty well. And like a lot of that stuff too. When I was working in the music stores, like you would see like 50 copy. This is going back to the early 2000s. Like 50 copies of Violator would come in, and they'd be on sale for $9.99, and then we'd like sell 20 of them.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like it's one of those records like we were like you always kind of heard or like listened or you knew enough about, but like, it's kind of like the tier two that become like fan favorites and stuff that I'm just not exposed enough to. But I feel like I'm right around there. Like I'll get there
Yeah.
eventually. So I'm gonna be coming back to you for some suggestions.
Yeah, Depeche Mode came to me in like at an interesting time, only because like CDs were just starting, and like 89. Well, they weren't just starting in 89, but for me they were. And I was kind of getting into CDs, and Depeche Mode would have like every record, every song on a record, just about, they would do a single for it, and there'd be
Right.
remixes for it, and they would come out on CD. And so I was collecting those and listening to them. And so I was really into Depeche Mode. This is like just coming out of high school. Music for the Masses, they did the video for that. They made a movie out of it. They did 101. I have it on VHS right there. And I used to watch this religiously. And then I just developed a love of Depeche Mode. The look, everything, the style, the music. And so when that Violator came out, like I was in the mix, man. I was first in line, so to speak, for that. And so yeah, I mean, it was kind of perfect storm for me in terms of timing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's always hard to say when people come to stuff late. People will just have a whole different experience of it going into it. So yeah, I don't know.
That's cool. I have another question for you. What is a VHS, Jason?
Well,
I'm
they
kidding.
used to have these things.
That's pretty cool. Is that like that's pretty sweet?
Yeah, it's cool. I have a few different ones. The music ones that I'll just show you these real quick. These are all I could only do 3 of them because I only have 3, but we could do a whole video on videos I'm grateful for, or VHS I'm grateful for. And I had all these as a kid. This one isn't the one I had as a kid, but I got it again. And then The Cure in Orange was one I used to listen to all the time. And so this is a live concert, and it's, I think, fantastic. And this one is the actual tape that I had back in 1988. It has the receipt, and this is Adam and the Ants, and this is
cool.
the Prince Charming review.
Nice.
I bought it at the warehouse. The receipt is there. I still have it. This is actually on beta, so these tapes are smaller. But
cool.
I love this stuff, man. It just speaks to, I guess, just how much I've been into music my whole life. And here I was 15 years old buying stuff like this at the warehouse, so anyway, that's what a VHS is, Chris.
That's very cool. Very, very cool.
All right, let me get you another number. We got to be getting close. Let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
2 left.
2 left. All right, let's do number 8.
Okay. I don't do this intentionally, but I love debut albums, I guess. And this is I think this is the greatest hip hop debut album ever. Another New York guy. And I brought this guy up briefly before. This is Nas's Illmatic.
Oh, cool.
Just a stone cold killer of a record. Listen, I didn't grow up in the projects. I didn't grow up in New York City, so it's hard to relate to this. But what I relate to about it is the beats are amazing, but also just the imagery he had. Like, there's cleverness about hip hop lyrics that, there's rhyming, there's puns and references, and going at somebody and responding to somebody. All that's great, but the way Nas and almost every record he puts out, and this obviously being his debut, just creates for you kind of like a movie in your head and kind of like imagery of what you're seeing. Like when you hear this album, you just imagine New York City around you. I don't know how else to describe it, but this was highly important because just like the Tribe Called Quest in the first video, that got me like into one style of hip hop. This catapulted me into another style of hip hop, which is more of like that New York street style. Nas is top 5 MC ever. I think he's one of the greatest songwriters ever in American history, regardless of what style of music he does. I know he's been featured in like classes at Harvard and really like acclaimed by poets and everything like that. But this record is absolutely crucial for anybody who wants to know anything about hip hop. I'm just looking at the tracks. I don't always remember the order, but he comes in with the New York State of Mind track. He does in one take. Life's a Bitch right into The World Is Yours in halftime. It might be one of the great A-sides in music history. And then on the flip side, just 5 tracks, straightforward: Memory Lane, One Love, One Time for Your Mind, Represent, and It Ain't Hard to Tell. And I think it's Ain't Hard to Tell that has the Michael Jackson Human Nature sample, which is really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
But this is just a really cool cover. I could have done a twofer on this. Like, I liked what you do with the Rolling Stones. The second album, it was written to follow up to Illmatic. It's just like 1A and 1B. It's like you talk about Rubber Soul Revolver, you could talk about Illmatic, and it was written back to back. It's like that type of 1-2 punch. So I'm glad I got this in, because this is just something that put me on a track for much more hip hop than I was exposed to. I wasn't listening to it when it came out. It came when his second record came out in 1996. I went back and found Illmatic. I'd heard the singles, but I'd never really listened to the record straight through. And this gets put on quite a bit. Yeah, just a great record. Not as Illmatic.
Yeah, that's a cool one. And while I mean, I respect it. I know it's great and all of that stuff. It's hard because it's maybe a generational thing. And I'm not saying it is for everybody, but for me, it's like, I did my rap thing sort of in the 80s, and then like just breaking into the 90s a little bit, instead, like, NWA was coming out as I was kind of like moving on to other things and stuff. So there's a huge blind spot. As much as I love early rap and hip hop and stuff like that, there's a whole segment that I just, similarly to, like you said, maybe Depeche Mode, there's like this blind spot that I was doing other things when all that stuff was happening, and so I kind of missed it.
Well, I think you're bringing up something that I struggle with too, because hip hop, like as a genre, was my first love in music. Like, I listened to everything, but like I was really into hip hop, but now I can't listen to the new stuff. I listen to Kendrick Lamar a lot. I like him. But there's very few things that like really grab me. And I do think that, and this is with all music, because like I was really trying to, like, I chose 12 or 15 albums right away that I wanted to do, but I really tried to be selective and like incorporate all genres. But like, I was so passionate about that Strokes record, because that's like new to me, even though it's 23 years old now. It's like, I don't find a lot after a certain point. I don't know, although I try. And that same thing happened to hip hop with me. There comes a cutoff where I still love it. I still love the stuff that I listen to. But I like, if my daughter like plays a song on the radio, I'm like, I don't like this. And then it's also funny because now my daughter, who's 10, is like discovering like Eminem now for now. And I'm like, oh, you have to understand, like when Dad was 12 or 13, that was just coming out. She's like, no way. I'm like, yeah. So, but I get what you're saying. Like you also have a certain style of hip hop, just like maybe it's a style thing for me. It was like the early 90s into the late 90s, 2000s was a very specific style. And there's probably 3 or 4 movements in that era, but that's what I loved. Like you were like Houdini, Fat Boys. Like I like that, but that's what you love. So you didn't carry over to the next style. I guess it's kind of working its way down the timeline to a certain extent.
Yeah. It's like going back and watching a black and white movie. It could be a masterpiece. And I feel fortunate that I grew up in a time where that stuff was on TV all the time. But trying to show that to someone now, they're just going to fall asleep oftentimes. They're not going to get early Hitchcock. They're not going to get, that early stuff. It's going to be boring to them. And I think I just rebought Houdini and Dougie Fresh. Dougie Fresh, oh my God. Mm-hmm. I listened to that tape a million times until it's shredded. And I'm listening to it now for the first time in a long time, even though I've sung it in my head for 30 years. And I still love it just as much. I don't even care. I think it's great. It doesn't lose anything to me. But asking someone, a young person, to go get Dougie Fresh and listen to Oh My God or whatever, I don't know. I don't know what they would think. It seems like they would be like, this is, this is going to feel like a black and white movie to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's true. I guess I'm kind of being like the old guy now too, where it's like I don't think that my stuff is better all the time, but there was a certain level of artistry and excellence that occurred where a lot of the stuff that I value is timeless. You put
Right.
trap it would really concern me if like you gave your son low end theory and he's like I don't get it
No, he
or
does. He
like I
likes
don't
that stuff. He does.
yeah so it's like that but okay so what I think what I'm really trying to say is that there might be pockets of guys now that are more impressive, but the volume of people that were prolific in some of these eras far exceeds the volume of people that are prolific now.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, and you're
like
right. I mean, you said a mouthful. I mean, these were the new guy, Grandmaster Flash, um, the Human Beatbox with Dougie Fresh, the Fat Boys. I mean, these are the guys that basically invented that stuff. And yeah, of course, people are always going to build on stuff, and it's gonna develop, and that's going to become the next generation stuff. So it's just normal and natural to happen. Yeah, I don't know what point there is to be made from this, except that people are just going to gravitate toward the stuff, generally speaking, not even their generation, but just the stuff they hear when they're young. And if there's someone that's listening to the radio and hanging out with their friends, they're probably listening to new stuff. And that's going to be the stuff they gravitate to. With me, my parents loved music. And so I got exposure to a lot of different stuff from their generation growing up, just to kind of set a foundation, so that when I started exploring my own stuff, I already had this whole back, foundation of like Grateful Dead and Rolling Stones and Cream, Eric Clapton, and, Country Joe and the Fish that I showed last time and all that stuff. So I feel fortunate for that, because otherwise I think I probably would have felt that way too. I would have been listening to LL Cool J and the Fat Boys and been like, what is Earth, Wind, and Fire? But the truth is I discovered Earth, Wind, and Fire first and loved
right.
it, so.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's a good point. I'm just too much of a snob sometimes.
We'll cut all that out. No, I'm kidding.
No, leave it in. Leave it in.
All right, let me do my last record here. And it's funny, we've been talking a little bit about Dave, my son. Dave, if you're watching, I love you. This is a record that we both connect to. And this is an era where I feel like I got to kind of influence him a little bit. Late 90s. And I was really into the swing revival that was happening. I was living in the Bay Area in California. It was really kind of an epicenter for that. I got to see Big Bad Voodoo Daddy live. I got to see Cherry Poppin'
Nice.
Daddies live. And I got to go to some shows and stuff. And because I was such a jazz head at that time, it was like it was tailor made for me. I went to Haight Ashbury and bought a pinstripe suit and a fedora, and I went to see Big Bad Voodoo Daddy dressed up. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it was. If people that don't know and weren't there, it was a whole thing. I mean, it was a trend. It was like people were coming back and doing the dances again. People were dressing the dress again. We were going and listening to the music live. It was as if we were back in the 40s again. It was crazy. Louis Prima and Cab Calloway was back from the dead for us.
That's cool.
And that's why this record, Zoo Suit Riot, the swinging hits of the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, I love so much. I got to see him live. This is a fantastic album. And my son went with me to go see Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. He didn't go to Cherry Poppin' Daddies, but I would play it constantly, and he just got it in his head. And even to this day, we can sing lyrics back and forth off it. I mean, Zoo Suit Riot was a massive hit, but it's just got a lot of great stuff on here. There's a song called Drunk Daddy, Master and Slave. They go back to back. They're the best tunes on this album, I think. It's kind of cool, incidentally, that this is signed by the lead singer. His name is Steve Perry, not to be confused with Journey's Steve Perry. But it's on the website, and you can get these. At least you could a couple years ago. So anyway, that was cool. I'm glad that I had a chance to snag it and have this on vinyl, because back in the day I would have had it on CD. But yeah, I'm grateful for multiple reasons. One is the connection I have with my son around this. The fact that he went to Big Bad Voodoo Daddy with me and had a great time, and the fact that this whole revival happened. It was very short lived, but Royal Crown Review, Brian Setzer's, Cherry Poppin' Daddies, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. I mean, it was such a great time for someone like me that, again, this was tailor made for. And if I actually lived in San Francisco proper, which I didn't, I always lived on kind of the outskirts. I probably would have been deep into it. As it was, I was going to the shows. I was taking dance lessons and stuff. So it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I joked that they need another revival. We need Swing Revival Part 2 to come back so we can relive those moments again. It was so fun. So Zoot Suit Riot, Cherry Poppin' Daddies, very thankful for that.
When you were going through that movement, I remember it from like a cultural perspective. Did it die when it hit MTV? Did it die when it went mainstream, or was it like what? Like why doesn't that still occur? I know Big Bad Voodoo Daddies definitely still plays. I'm almost positive they do.
Yeah. I think Cherry Poppin' Daddies. It's got to be. I imagine. Well, I don't know for sure. I have this great book that I got that came out during the time, all about swing, and it has all the bands and everything, but everything was still kind of big during that time. Why it crashed and burned, I have to imagine. Well, it was Swingers came out, and that kind of popularized it because Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, I believe, performs in that movie, and then The Mask with Jim Carrey came out, and I believe that's Royal Crown Review performs in that movie. So it's kind of a culturally kind of there, but then it just kind of the bubble burst. One thing that has to be a problem, that was a problem back in the old days, and part of the reason why we got out of big band music is that it's very expensive to employ a big band.
Yeah.
You got like 20 guys on stage with you everywhere you go. Like, it's got to be tough. And so, yeah, when it was popular, it was great. But as it dies down, you can't. How do you afford that? It wasn't like it was so popular that these guys were getting rich. So I imagine that's part of it. But also, yeah, I mean, I just think it was a fad, for whatever reason. It was I don't even know why it was a perfect time for it. There's always been bands that kind of kept that alive. Stray Cats was one back in my day, with going back to the early 80s, I think, even with like MTV and Stray Cat Strut and Rock This Town. Always loved that stuff. And then it just made sense that eventually progressed much later, actually, I guess, at least a decade and a half, 2 decades later, turned into the swing revival, which incidentally was a lot of punk bands that, like Cherry Poppin' Daddies, would put like one swing song on a record or whatever, a punk record. This record, Zoot Suit Riot, is actually a compilation of the songs that were on their punk records. And then they put this out, all their swing tunes on one record, and it blew up. And Brian Setzer did Dirty Boogie, and it blew up. And Big Bad Voodoo Daddy did their record, and it blew up. So a lot of things kind of happened at the right time. I guess it was sort of a perfect storm. I don't know. But it was literally to the extent in San Francisco where, much like back in the day, where in the 40s, and going back to the jazz days and the big band days and the bebop days. Been talking so much now, I'm like going back to the bebop days, where like you'd walk down the street and like all you'd hear was music coming out of every different club, and there'd be lining the streets and stuff back in those days. That's how San Francisco was in the revival days. It was like in around the late 90s, you'd be walking down the street, in downtown San Francisco, and there'd be music coming out of those clubs and stuff. It was really an attempt to bring back that part. And it was actually connected to punk in a lot of ways, except that it tried to maintain that sort of classiness that came out of like the 40s and stuff. So it was like mixing Sinatra with the Sex Pistols somehow. And we made the swing revival.
That is really cool. Because actually, because like, punk isn't a sound to me. Punk is a counterculture movement or a revival of what was great once. Like, that's punk to me. Like, one of my definitions of punk. So like, hearing that, it makes sense that there is that overlap and consistency there. That's really cool. I'm gonna have to research this a little bit. I'm sure there's a documentary, or there's definitely articles on it and books you mentioned, right? So
yeah. There's stuff out there for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll bring us home, man. This is the last one. We don't even have to pick a number. This is a cool way to end it for me. This album opened my eyes to a lot, and I didn't get exposed to this till probably 20 years ago, like right in the middle of college. This is the Cowboy Junkies, the Trinity Session. This is a record I'm really grateful for. They're a Canadian band, and I have like a lot of their albums. I probably have most of their catalog. I'm grateful for two reasons for this record. So first off, I got turned on to it because I heard a cover of their cover of Sweet Jane, the Velvet Underground song. And then on this album, they also do a cover of I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry.
Oh, really?
Which is just stellar. Yeah. They're Canadian, but this really opened me up to like Americana and like folk. But I can't think of a better name for a band, Cowboy Junkies, because it sounds like this jazzy, folky, laid back, like they stretch songs out, but it's not overwhelmingly stretched out, and it really makes you sound like a junkie's playing the music, but in a beautiful way. It's gray, but it's bright at the same time. Another one of these albums that I just play really loud, even though it's pretty mellow. The other thing this did for me is this opened me up to like the idea of like, I didn't know it at the time, of like an audiophile sense. This is one of the best recorded albums ever. It was recorded in the Trinity Church in Canada, and you could hear it. You could hear the atmosphere when you put this record on, even if you stream it and just play like the digital versions of it. It's like these guys are right in the room with you. It's like you're almost like approaching a room that they're playing in, and then you're just in the middle of it, and it's just so three-dimensional. This is a beautiful, beautiful record. Their whole catalog is beautiful. They write a lot of their own originals, but they throw in a cover or two on a lot of their albums. They've covered Neil Young, they've covered Bob Dylan, they've covered they've done some Rolling Stone stuff. I would highly recommend experiencing this album, at least sampling like their top stream songs on Spotify. It's the only way to really capture what they sound like. They don't sound like any other band I've ever heard. About 15 years ago, I saw them live in a small converted playhouse, which is a theater now. Holds like 400 people. I was third row center, and without shredding a guitar, without playing anything upbeat, they just totally melted my face. Like, it was just an amazing experience. So if you don't know this record, it's another one I think you should give it a shot. It's something you play like on a Sunday morning or like a rainy Saturday night, crank it up and just be mesmerized by what they do. But this opened my eyes to so many things, and I appreciate finding this record, and they become one of my favorite bands through and through. So Cowboy Junkies, the Trinity Session.
Well, dang, dude, you definitely have been exposing me to a lot of stuff that I need to catch up on. I've heard of the Cowboy Junkies, but it's just, again, it's another blind spot for me. So yeah, I got a whole list of stuff I need to listen to now.
Yeah, we'll get the playlist rolling. We have this archived forever in the internet, so we could always go back to it. And
That's true.
this was a lot of fun doing these two episodes because, again, I even got a comment from a friend that watched the show. It's like, oh, this wasn't about the greatest albums of all time. These are very specific to your taste and your influence and what has helped you establish something and evolve that taste going forward. So yeah, I really enjoyed doing this. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I did too, man. Yeah, it's been great doing this stuff with you, dude. I mean, and we definitely needed a little bit of a break from jazz. Not that we're gonna, we'll be back, but yeah, we have too many interests to like pigeonhole ourselves. So yeah, we had to, this was kind of a great first kind of way to launch into something different. So yeah, man, again, I've said it last time. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for this idea. I'm grateful that we did this series, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one, man.
Me too, man.